Hello, hello, hello. I am Alex Kashuta. This is the Subversive Podcast, and today I have with me writer and cultural commentator Default Friend. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. I mean, we've been chatting for a long time. You're kind of one of the first people that I was interested in when I got onto Twitter, and essentially kind of that made me interested in being a part of Twitter because it seemed like a lot of cool people were on it. And yeah, I'm really happy that we got to have this conversation because we were chatting at one point about starting a podcast, kind of having like a co-host style podcast, but. Yeah, I mean, things move really fast on the internet. So in the end, this is kind of the format that I landed on.
Yeah, wow, has it been since like July since we've been on each other's radar? It's been a while.
Yeah, I think it's probably maybe August, September, or something like that. Yeah, probably August. Yeah, but
Yeah, I think like I was still doing stuff with Gen Z Mafia because I remember like I would like wake up, I would talk to you over video chat, and then I was like trying to wrangle like Gen Z kids and a Discord.
but what happened to that project? Are you not involved anymore?
I like drop in and out of stuff. I mean, it was really Emma Salinas and Suds who were organizing it, and I feel like I just talked about it a lot. So, I don't want to like take any credit for organizing that or anything. But I used to be like super active, and now it's just sort of the kids doing what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, you were like their den mother for a while and kind of corralling the younger generation. Yeah, I mean, this year obviously I need to comment on this year because this has been an interesting year. I mean, for me it's been kind of productive because being in the COVID bunker has made me become very online, which has come with a lot of opportunities, but also with a lot of I don't know, like alienation and being a bit, I don't know, a bit weird. How has this year impacted you? And, how do you see the kind of the ripple effects of, just being in the pod for a year, kind of being forced to live the ultra online life?
I I don't even remember what I was like before this year. It's been like I feel like almost every day now I'm like thinking about like, wow, this fucking sucks. Like I tweet about it a lot. I thought it would be like kind of fun. Because I'm a little bit like I handle being alone pretty well, but it's like it's I'm pretty over it.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Like here in Romania, we kind of have this indefinite, like total mask mandate. So you have to, and I live in the city, so you have to wear the mask at all times when you're going for a walk or something. And I'm at that point where I just want to rip it off my face and scream because it's just and also everyone's fallen in line. Like they were a bit rebellious at the beginning, but now everyone's wearing a mask and they're looking at you like we're judging you if you move it a little bit. So it's I don't know, it's a bit dystopian. I'm
Well,
expecting this to
it's
end.
not like the mask, right? That bothered like, fuck the mask at this point, but it's like no one wants to hang out. Actually, you know what? Even more than people not wanting to hang out or like not being able to go to restaurants, what gets to me is when I have friends or like even family who are super COVID paranoid. And I was totally like this like the first 3 months before we knew what was going on. But they expect you to pass judgment on other people and they think it's like a bonding experience. I'm like, fuck, no. Like if I'm invited to a party, oh, I'm not necessarily going to go to a party, but if I was invited to a party, I mean, like I'm not gonna say
Yeah.
no off the bat. Like I really want to see people, and like I almost think the like attempt at like shared judgment is even scarier to me than anything else because it's like you, how is this not affecting you?
Yeah, I think it's for a lot of people, it's kind of like the minimal, bonding experience that they get to have. Because, I mean, if they're, COVID paranoid, they think, okay, I haven't had any human interaction in a while. At least we can share on our common COVID paranoia. Anyone? Well, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, my husband is a bit more COVID paranoid than me, so I could completely empathize. He doesn't try to like lure me into common COVID paranoia, but I'm like, yeah, I would love to receive a party invitation so that at least I could say no. At least I know other people are doing something fun while I'm in the COVID bunker. But in terms of, tech, and I know you're kind of a self-described tech optimist, and you've been in tech for a while, or tech adjacent. This has been a really good year for tech, at least for the bigger players in tech who've had to facilitate our new life in different ways. I mean, how do you see that? There's obviously a positive in the sense that, these products actually are helping. We wouldn't be using them if they weren't helping. They are facilitating some aspects of our lives. But there's also obviously a downside to it. There's kind of the alienation, like kind of from your tech optimistic perspective, is there a way to mitigate this? How can people approach this without losing their mind, taking the good and maybe leaving the bad?
I mean, as much as I like hate going on video, I think like video is probably really big. I have a lot of friends through Twitter. So like, I mean, anything that's giving you an outlet to talk to other people and connect with other people. But I don't think like, as optimistic as I am about tech, I don't think it can replace human to human interaction. I think the best way to look at tech is like augmenting connection instead of replacing connection.
Yeah, I think just because there's just no other option. I mean, it has like necessarily replaced it because we kind of have this weird like militaristic state that tells us, the human connection will kill you, and not only will it kill you, it will kill everyone around you, and you will be to blame. And it's this weird kind of totalitarian frame that doesn't really allow for anything else. So, yeah, I think in an ideal world you'd have that augmentation, but in this way, we're kind of just been funneled down the tech track, willing or not. Yeah, it's a pretty, I don't know. It's just feeling more and more dystopian every day, and I don't even know if it's not really the technology. It's just being forced to rely on it, and just being like, okay, this is your outlet, enjoy it. It's actually better, for people like me who can work from home, who can, order the Amazon Fresh and whatever Uber Eats and stuff. But I think there's also a lot of people who are not, who they're not the Twitter people that are having like lives of silent desperation that are completely ignored.
Yeah, I mean, that's, most people. I mean, there's also other people who've been out of work or like have been underemployed now going on a year, and they're relying on like a rent moratorium. And the minute that ends, like, what's next? Yeah, I mean, it's super scary. It is extremely dystopian. It makes me sad that I think we're going to see sort of like an anti-tech backlash. I think because people resent tech, and I understand it, but I think like the world is changing in a lot of ways, and we need to rely on tech for that augmentation. But that doesn't mean we can't fight back and, Zoom replace it. Like, I found out a family member died this year through a Zoom invite to a funeral. Like that, and that's like totally, I mean, that's like a Black Mirror episode, but I know lots of people are experiencing stuff like that. And it's that kind of stuff that's making people so angry, right?
Yeah.
And that's totally justified. But I think there's a way to be a techno optimist, but understand that we don't, our lives don't have to be surrounded by Google Calendar invites and FaceTime instead of Thanksgiving, and whatever the hell people are, Tinder instead of sex.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a Zoom wedding, so I know all about this. I think what people tend to react to is the fact that this is kind of, because we've made growth our main telos, and this is the direction that people are going in, and tech is the major growth industry. It kind of has become the telos of society to see these big giants grow, and there's not really any other guiding principle. So like you said, if we use these tools, they're almost magical tools, but we're not really using them. We're just kind of going after the growth and kind of letting the chips fall where they may. There's not really a guiding principle behind it. And I also think a lot of people have become a bit maybe science, not deniers, but science skeptics after this whole year of COVID, fuck arounds and mask mandates and the politicization of I don't know, protective gear and all this stuff, and all the experts coming out saying that, a BLM rally is more important than COVID spreading, and things like that, that people are like, wait a minute, like, I don't know if this is healthy, or it's a good direction. So I feel like, people are instinctively, they feel something is wrong. They probably, the thing is, the pendulum's going to go one way and then it's going to go the other way. And then, I don't think we're ever going to be in the middle, maybe for 5 minutes, and then it's going to swing, because that's just the nature of, the animal spirits that govern the way people feel about stuff. But I feel like, to me, it feels like a necessary instinct, because, we've had this super optimistic, we're going to the moon type energy about tech for a while, and it has delivered, obviously. It's, people aren't starving, things are going well. Even this Zoom call is almost like magic. But it's also, I don't know, it's also concerning to see it take over. Like, these companies are based on, essentially on, network externalities. They have logarithmic growth cycles, and, things happen almost overnight, and your life is changed, and it's really scary, because it is like magic. So I kind of feel like they've, they're onto something, but like you said, it might lead to an overreaction, and then, yeah, it'll overcorrect in some way.
I mean, the overcorrection it makes sense to scapegoat. So I mean, my fear is, scapegoating technology instead of the systems in place that allow, Google to censor what kind of information we have access to. Like, it's not the technology behind Google that is the danger. It's that if you want to look something up, nobody's going on Bing.com. No one's using DuckDuckGo. You use Google. Most people's email is, hosted by Google. Like, that is the problem. It's not email at all. But you see people, that's how reactions work, right? They're not going to say, well, fuck Google. They're going to say, fuck tech, or not. It's not going to be fuck Twitter. It's going to be fuck social media. And I understand that, like, it totally makes sense. But it's not the 90s, right, where we could sort of afford a lull. We're about to see, and this sounds crazy when I tweet it, it sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but, like, we're on the precipice of, like, serious climate change, for example. We've already seen a little bit of it, but it's going to get worse and worse and worse with each passing year. We can't afford to turn our backs on tech for a lot of reasons. It's going to be things like this Zoom call, but it's also going to be like these companies are the only ones with, like, the resources and the know-how to, like, get us out of bigger messes than I think we're aware of, or I think that's, like, that I think are, like, top of mind. So that's my kind of trepidation there. I really do think that, like, we are going to see people, the science thing's a great example, right? Like, people aren't anti-institution, which makes sense. I'm very skeptical of myself. You're seeing an actual reaction to science itself. I feel like that's absolutely not the move. Like, it's not the time to say, well, how can we rely more on our, intuition beyond things, beyond the social sphere? It's like, how do we fix the institution so we can trust the science that's coming out, not can we trust science, period.
Yeah, I think it's also, a bit of a backlash to, science being used as this, this kind of institutional world. It's a very political word, and you hear things like the scientific consensus and scientists and research shows and things like that being like,
and, like, what does it mean?
Yeah, no, but it's been instrumentalized, like, to such a degree that it doesn't really mean that much, and people have learned to fear it because it changes, one day after the other. It's, obviously science does change, and updating science is an important thing, but seeing it, instrumentalized against political causes one day, and then it completely flipping 180 degrees, a month later, just kind of breeds this type of suspicion. And I think there was actually, like, a survey, obviously. Surveys, self-reported data is not really good, but it was, asking people. I think it had, like, a liberal conservative split, and they were asking them, like, oh, what's your opinion on science? And people were generally, science in the abstract was kind of pretty people were pretty happy. I think liberals were a little slightly more convinced that science is 100% good, but conservatives were also there at like 70-80%. But then when the conversation flipped to the institutions, to the scientists, to the consensus, conservatives were much more like saying, okay, this is bullshit, because they've been the target of most of the I fucking love science people telling them that science is not on their side and that they're creationists or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the I fucking love science crowd is like, I mean, it's small. I think like the average person or like out of Twitter isn't really like thinking of those folks, but it's sort of like the same tech. It's the same treatment. It's like tech isn't all like poly nerds in the Bay, right? Like a lot of a lot of tech doesn't have the aesthetic of Silicon Valley, and people forget that. But it becomes a shorthand for this thing that's ruining our lives. Um, so I mean, like we really need people who fall outside of that aesthetic, or who fall outside of the stereotype to be speaking up. And I mean, I don't know what the answer is to like what to do about the institution of science, and what to do about the fact that our universities are totally sideways, or that the word science is totally abused. But I mean, I wish there was something.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think this whole the subject of tech censorship comes up, and I see a lot of people, especially kind of in right wing circles, saying, in a weird way, saying, "Oh, the government needs to step in," and that always kind of gets my haunches up, because I'm like, I don't know if that's a solution,
Right,
because
like I don't want state sponsored anything. Like that's not going to be any better than like a Google micronation or something. Like it's just, both are bad.
exactly. And the thing is, at least, in a way, like big tech, the tech that scares people, and these monopolies, these oligopolies, what's so scary about them is that they're highly efficient, because they have this extremely well, versed hierarchical structure where they can get shit done. And the bad thing sometimes about government is that they're inefficient, but they're also constrained by even more factors. So it's essentially trying to get this lumbering, inefficient, uncoordinated thing, that's completely subject to political whims. It's like, if you think that the government's just going to implement your political will, if you're like in power for 2 minutes, you're mistaken, because 2 years later someone else is at the helm, and they're going to crush your dissent, tell you what type of speech you should be saying. So I feel like people should be maybe a bit more careful about saying, oh yeah, we need the government to implement my will on these companies. Yeah, it's a fucking terrible situation. I don't really see a good solution to this, except for decentralization, alternative platforms, maybe. Yeah, it's there's no winning.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that these big companies do acquire the upstarts and the passionate kids, and you can only say it's time to build for so long before someone offers you $20 million or however much it is. So that's another danger that I feel like, even when I'm telling people like build your own stuff, even if it's only super like localized, you only get your immediate community to use it. Well, then what happens if it's more than your immediate community? And in what other ways does it get crushed, or are you stifled, or if you're not um, if you're not acquired or copied, AWS could kick you off. Like it's a tough problem.
Yeah. Do you think maybe like essentially trust busting or something like that could be a solution? I mean, this is a bit of an old school way of doing it, but yeah, maybe just like dismantling the megacorps.
I have no idea. I it it's just they're too big, and they're too interwoven, which is again like why I again like I understand why people are going to start thinking the solution is just abandon tech altogether, because how do you fight back against something that has its like claws so deep in your life? It seems like there's no other option, and I don't know what the actual I couldn't even begin to imagine. I think we probably need um like I mean I can't even say it because it's too ridiculous, like well-meaning billionaires to defect. I mean, I don't know. I start your own country. Like, it's, which people are actually very seriously trying to do. But yeah, I have no idea what the possible solution could be.
Yeah, I think there's quite an interesting push now towards like localism and people kind of congregating on the basis of things that are like not their ethnicity or not their religion necessarily, but they kind of want to create these little parallel communities for people that are like-minded. Do you think that's got any teeth? That's might be a vision for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of it's been on people's radar for a while. I wouldn't count like the communes of the 60s and 70s. I think they're a little bit different in texture than what's going on in sort of these tech and tech adjacent communities. But I mean, it's been bubbling for a little bit, and I think that people would be surprised if they knew just how much like charter cities and even like a step further, people who are thinking of trying to create these like you know states in the cloud. There's a lot of people like seriously working on this. I hope that it's something that doesn't get crushed by the powers that be. I think it could be really interesting. I think it could be an interesting experiment in sort of trying to fix what's gone wrong elsewhere. But I don't know what it's going to look like when it goes from like maybe 1,000 people are involved to 5,000 people, or from 5,000 people to 10,000.
Yeah, I think this, kind of being able to do more remote work. I do think it's a bit overstated how many people are actually doing remote work, but the fact that more people are kind of pushed into this direction does kind of allow for that. But at the same time, I feel like remote work opens up a bit of a problem. Like I know in myself, it's like the unstructured days, the disconnection from from the people that you're supposed to be working with. It really does it takes a toll, and I'm kind of idealistic about it because I like working remotely. It's good, I can make an income. I don't have to be in central whatever to do it. But at the same time, it's also doing things to me that I don't know I like. Maybe that's just kind of like the Luddite in me. I haven't really adapted to it, but I'm like, there's some mysterious evil here that I can't put my finger on.
Well, there's
But
no boundary between, it's just everything's one flow. I hate it too. I mean, it's like, even like we're on this conversation, I like swiped a notification away like 2 minutes in or something. That was a work email. Like, it's Saturday, it's, there's no boundary between this is what I'm doing at home, this is my home, and then this is my place of work. And that's been sort of, that boundary's been very blurry in tech for a long time. But I mean, like, even at the fun startup where there's mandatory fun, you're very able to like leave that at the office, and then you live somewhere else. Like, your partner is somewhere else, your friends are somewhere else. But now it's just all one. So it's like a soup of stuff where nothing is really clearly siloed, and I mean, I'm less productive personally. I don't like it either. I miss being in an office.
yeah, and I really liked because I used to bike to work, so it was kind of like I had these little events that were kind of the event that was triggering the work and the event that was stopping the work. So whenever I saw my bike, I knew that this was kind of like this liminal space where I could just get into the zone. And it was also pretty cool because I was biking through central London. It's like it's just all these like fancy buildings, and it's just like this event every morning. And that's probably the thing I miss most about London was my commute, which I know is probably not something that's very common to people working in the city. But yeah, it definitely takes a lot of adaptation. I think maybe tech could be maybe tech's going to offer something to make this stuff easier. But at the moment, I only have stuff that's really distracting.
Yeah, I think like regardless of what industry you work in, having like a place for work and like a place for home and a place for social, it they can't be all one sort of fluid movement. It's not healthy. Your work shouldn't, I mean, what this does is it makes like work touch every part of your day and every part of your existence. there's no way to separate it off.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also those moments missing where you just bump into people, because there's that, that minimal interaction you have with people, just, buying a bagel or whatever, it just kind of disappeared. And for a lot of people I know, because, even just city life doesn't make you the most sociable person. Like, you hang out with a handful of people, but outside of that, most of your social interactions are with people that you kind of have these minimal quips with, or have a joke with the guy who's at the reception at the office or something. But that's kind of that the disappearance of that, and obviously all the other stuff that happened with COVID. I feel like it's going to compound. Like, there's all these little things missing and all these new things added on, and yeah, it's not surprising to me that people are going a bit nutty about staying at home so long.
I'm surprised that like Second Life hasn't. Do you remember Second Life? That it was like a game where there was no plot. You just were a person walking around the world. I'm
Hmm.
surprised like that we haven't seen something like that come back. I mean, we have stuff like Branch and GatherTown, which are like these sort of digital offices where you have an avatar, and it's I think they're both like these 8-bit kind of environments, and you walk around and you can only hear people you're physically close to, if within these environments. But that's not quite the same, right? It's like invite only, it's meant for work. But I'm surprised like nobody has tried to put us in, more obviously into these digital worlds. It seemed like they were so popular in like 2005 or whatever, and now like now's the time we need them the most.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because obviously all we have digital worlds, but they're kind of reduced to one dimension in a way, and it's kind of the dimension that you care about. Like, Twitter for me, it's been really good because I'm like a very highly verbal person, and what I care about when I interact with people is just little snarky quips, and yeah, I'm like, yeah, this is my jam. I love this stuff. And my husband, he's really into Call of Duty, like he got so hard into Call of Duty right now, and he's just hanging out with his friends. They're, I don't know, killing Russians or whatever people do on that game. So he that's his virtual world, and he's like, I've never been happier. I just hang out with my friends like it's normal, and then we get these stats, and we increase our whatever XP or things, and it's quite cool. Like, he gets to go on raids, and yeah, he's super satisfied with this social side of his life. But I feel like we have Second Life, but it's just split into different interest groups in a way. And yeah, maybe you don't need the whole package. Maybe it's just, I don't know, whatever
Well,
tickles you.
what Second Life does though is like it's serendipitous, because like you can meet strangers on Twitter, of course, like we both know this, or on
Yes.
Clubhouse, which is like which is for anyone who doesn't know, Clubhouse is, it's like Twitter for audio, sort of. I guess that's one way to describe it. But like with Second Life, or like The Sims Online, or There, which is another similar game. I don't know if game is really the right word, but you could bump into people just like real life. There's no the like that serendipitous social thing is totally gone. Even on Twitter, it's a little bit, you need to make an effort a little bit more than you might if you just bumped into someone at the bagel store, like you were mentioning.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there might also be a little bit of friction. Like, I feel like, people are in a way it's a bit awkward to bump into someone as well. Like, I feel like a lot of the tools that we have now digitally minimize social friction to the to completely bare bottom. We don't want to go there. And you essentially kind of just get everything on demand. And I feel like serendipity is super cool in a way if it's a good surprise. But if you bump into someone you don't like, it's or someone that you're like, oh, this person's annoying, then maybe that's not as good. I don't know.
But I feel like you, of all people, would argue that like bumping into people, like that's part of the texture of life, right? Like you need to bump into someone you don't like to eventually bump into someone you do. Like you can't curate it out, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I feel like that's very in line with your, like sacrifices are necessary. Like you kind of need these discomforts to have a full life, because those are, what brings like uh there's a great verse in the Book of Mormon, like like Adam would not have ever known uh joy had he not first known misery. And I mean, that's, speaking of tech, also, like that's a big blind spot of tech.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I completely agree, and I think um, there's kind of the stated preference level and the revealed preference level. I do, and I would use a system like that, but it's also something I'd kind of have to push myself to use, and I do it in a conscious way. But I think a lot of the products that have actually made it to the point where they're super common and everyone uses them do so because they minimize friction, essentially, because it is the shortest way from A to B. And if you have a product that complicates things a little bit or induces just a little bit of discomfort, then it's not gonna make it in the marketplace of stuff, because people do kind of want to get it done in the most comfortable way. So I think there is a market for making stuff for people who want to be uncomfortable. I mean, there's a market for Spartan Race, which I think is kind of nutty, but I'm like, yeah, that's all about discomfort.
But like less, it's less something as on the nose as Spartan Race, but it's like with with like Uber Eats, like it's you get your food very easily, but then like you miss the experience of like going into the restaurant and smelling the smells and maybe knowing who cooked your food, or like even that exchange, like someone's handing it to you. Like now Uber Eats, they have a new feature where they just put the food at your door, um, and that's maybe fine with food, but like with social interaction, like that there's no service, there's no transaction there. Like a social interaction should sort of have the full spectrum of, all right, this kind of sucks, but like if I didn't go to this party in real life with a couple of people I didn't like, I would have never spoken to the people I do like. Maybe I even like them more in contrast to these other people who I like less, or any number of situations like that.
Yeah, I think, but in a way, I think that this is kind of, you have to know this, you kind of have to realize this. You kind of have to be philosophically calibrated enough to understand that this is life. And even if most things come to you on a silver platter, because this is the ease that we've become accustomed to, there are certain things that just can't. And that's kind of that's, like you said, this is kind of my shtick as well. Like you kind of have to understand which parts of your life there is friction. You have to engage with it. You have to go through to get to the other side, and that's the only way to get there. And I feel like a lot, kind of the ease of so many things kind of induces the illusion that you don't necessarily have to go through friction to get there. I mean, I've seen this in myself. I've tried to stay relatively social throughout this whole thing, but I feel like my tolerance for social awkwardness or social just social friction's kind of gone down a bit. So I'm like, I don't know. I also don't want to argue with people anymore. Like back in the day, I was like, we have to solve this problem, but now I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll just be, I don't know. We'll forget about it in 2 weeks.
Wasn't that like wild? I feel like a disagreement can be a friendship ending event.
Yeah.
um People don't like to disagree. Like you're not allowed to be wrong anymore. I feel like I'm constantly being like, I like I'll start a sentence and I don't know where it's going to end, right? Like Mark, like halfway through. But it just feels like you're not like, if you disagree with someone, it means that the relationship is over, which to your point, I think is like a product of this frictionless society.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, I feel like maybe because, for example, we have these like weird parasocial relationships online with people that we agree with, because we wouldn't be following them if we didn't. And then we kind of move those standards into real life. And then when you have a disagreement or someone doesn't really get you, and the more based and red pilled you are, people won't get you. So yeah, you're kind of,
Well, I mean, even online, right? Like you should, all disagree with like most of someone's takes, even, but like really like them as a person. And I feel like I'm constantly like, when people, just take a really easy example, people will like come and agree with me and be like, yeah, this person's a dumbass. I'm like, no, like, they're not a dumbass. Like, don't, like, I don't give a fuck about like their personal life. Like, I don't want a character judgment on them. I just disagree with their opinion on this one, niche thing. Like that is, it feels like there is no room for like, I am like totally like misaligned with this person's philosophy, but they're still an interesting person who's like worth speaking to, or you know whatever, and engaging with on any level. And I like that really bothers me about Twitter, that like if you disagree with someone, more than once, people assume you don't like them, which is just like that's that was not the norm even like 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's I see these like these people takes all the time now. It's like these people, and then they kind of gather like maybe two or three descriptors of, you know, they've been this way, they've done this, and then these people are like this, and then you have a tight little box to fit your people in, and then you know who your people are and who those people are. It's quite clean cut, and I mean I kind of get it in a way. The platform itself kind of makes you, I don't want to use this word, it's tribalize or whatever, kind of segregate into your groups. But yeah, I don't know if it's platform induced or if it's just kind of the culmination of just being human and wanting to I don't know, to socialize with the people that you agree with and show them, you know, not only do I agree with you, but I am against your enemies, so we're friends, no?
But you know, like, what are the people who aren't easily categorized to, right? Like, you know, there's plenty of people who, like, you know, they don't have like one political orientation, or they're not like wholesale pro anything. And it feels like no matter what kind of corner you're on, you have to pick a lane. And I mean, you know, as I'm saying this, this is not a very original thought. This is just the echo chamber thing, right? But it, you know, I don't know. It's not a very enjoyable experience. I wish that like more people push back on it, or at least to like, I mean, you know, I'm you know, guilty as charged as anyone else, but like, at least with the disagreement thing, I always try to like make very clear, like, I disagree with this person's tweet. I don't know who they are personally. I'm not gonna, you know, drop into like the gutter of like character-based attacks,
Yeah.
which I think is like the least people could do.
Yeah, I mean, it does work, you know, character-based attacks, you know, do work, and it does kind of get you clout to be in like a, I don't know, a flame war with whoever. So
That's
it,
true.
yeah, it makes sense. It's a good, I guess it's a good strategy if you're looking for, you know, engagement. It definitely drives engagement. I think it's just human nature. People like to see drama, especially if it's really intellectual and you're sparring and there's there's sparks flying.
It's like reality TV where you can like further violate everyone's privacy or something.
Exactly. Let me see. I also wanted to ask you about the background in a way. Like you've been living in San Francisco. You have been part of the Bay Area class for a while. What's it like? Because the thing is, you know, I have never been to San Francisco, so obviously any take I have on San Francisco is completely informed by right wing propaganda. But it sounds like like it's sometimes a bit scary. How does it feel?
So I've actually never lived in the city of San Francisco. I've always lived south in the South Bay, you know, in the suburbs. And then before that, I lived in San Jose, which is, it's weird. I was just talking to someone last night about how I think San Jose is like the third biggest city in California or something, but it's like never really thought of. But yeah, the city of San Francisco is dirty. It's kind of scary to walk through if you're in the wrong neighborhood. It's totally overpriced. I mean, it's like it's beyond parody. it, all the I would say most of the right wing propaganda about it is 100% correct.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Is there any? I mean, I know about the California exodus. I know a few people, you know, who are friends of mine who were living in San Francisco and that are not living in San Francisco anymore. And I've heard of a lot of people moving out, and this the same is the case about London. You know, I've moved out of London as well with the first exodus, COVID exodus, and it's happening all over the place. I mean, do you see that? Is that a thing now? Are people moving to Phoenix and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, people are getting the hell out there. I think like the three big places are Utah, Texas, and Florida. None of them, I'm not sure on Utah, but you know, at least Texas and Florida don't have income tax, so I think that sort of solves that mystery. And then sort of, you know, the stragglers are going to wherever their family is. Um, so I mean, yeah, there's just no reason to be here anymore. I think there's a you know, a small cohort of young people, and by young I mean like 18, 19 years old, who are sort of you know, they see San Francisco as a frontier. They're it's new San Francisco. I don't know how long they're going to stay here because the money is all leaving. But yeah, I mean, like people, love to talk about like rent's gone down 30%. All right, but like our starting point was like $6,000 a month. So like it's still too expensive here. And crime's gone up in the city of San Francisco. I mean, I don't blame anyone for leaving. The only reason I haven't like left permanently is because I have, I am going to be leaving in the spring, but I have other things that are keeping me here that I have to wait to finish up before I could head off forever.
Yeah, so it's on your mind as well. I thought you were kind of you're gonna pull through and a true Bay
Oh,
Area believer.
no way. No. It's so far. My family's on the East Coast. I mean, it's just like there's just no reason for it. Um, it's far away. It's expensive. It's dangerous. It's locked down indefinitely, so you can't even like go to a restaurant or like you can't even like walk to like a cafe and just like chill there for a second and get a breather totally alone. It's like you're kind of expected to be in like the prison of your own home. Like very like I say to my boyfriend all the time, like we live in a Scandinavian prison. Like it's tough.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's the same here, to be honest. But we're lucky because we have kind of a slightly bigger house than we used to in London, and there's a garden outside. But it just can't go on for any longer. Yeah, but I'm not going to bore you with my COVID gripe. But yeah, it's every day I complain. um, and also, you were mentioning Utah, and I know this is kind of tied into another thing that you really really love. It's Mormons. Like
Yeah.
being Romanian, I also know nothing about Mormons except for their wonderful musical. I went and saw it; it's quite good. And I don't know, a few Lifetime movies, and the fact from my new atheist days that their whole religion is completely ridiculous and that they're living on planets and stuff. But that's all I know. Why are Mormons interesting?
Um, I got into them sort of as a kid. I've always been like very attracted to like cultures you can join. Like not subcultures per se, but like uh, I find that like I think like people really like Japan, not only because it has like, anime is cool and there's like they use like bright colors a lot in their pop cultural artifacts, but it's like they, Japanese is a different language from English. It's a coherent culture, and America really doesn't have that. So Americans love to get obsessed with like other countries in a way that I feel like doesn't really happen in Europe or even Africa or Asia. Um, so for me, like that's how I felt about Mormons. Like this is a culture where they speak English. It's like a coherent culture. They have their own way. They have their own recipes. They have their own way of eating. They have their own music, their own movies. And it was like, oh, cool. Like I could join this if I wanted to. Like it's not just I don't have to just be like a tourist, in the same way like a weeaboo might in Japan. So I feel that I've felt that way about like the Amish variously in my life, or like certain like evangelical movements. But yeah, I mean that's really it. It's just like you feel so unmoored as an American that it's very exciting when you see like any kind of like coherent cultural movement that's has a history and like there's architectural sites and there's cities. There's just like things that don't that don't really exist elsewhere in our culture.
Yeah, and they do seem pretty self-contained, and they seem really happy in a way. Like I don't think I've ever seen a Mormon. I think I had two colleagues in uni that were Mormon. I mean, we didn't really talk about it, but they were genuinely like content people. So there's just something attractive about that. Like there's a coherent lifestyle in there. I mean, I don't really know exactly what they do, but it seems to be working. Is that also part of the attraction?
I mean, no, I don't think so. I don't know how much of that happiness is genuine. There is like a culture of like politeness and kindness that I think could be like a double-edged sword when you're like, in a friendship with someone who's Mormon or even like ex-Mormon. That's like a whole other topic. But I think for me, it's just like here are a people within my own country that are super accessible with like a history in a way that very few other peoples or places have a history and shared values, a shared vision of the future. Of course there's like plenty of groups with like histories, but Mormons are also looking forward. um, so I mean, yeah, I think that's really what draws me to them.
Yeah, it is super interesting. I mean, yeah, from my perspective, I've only heard them from jokes. I only understand Mormon culture from people making jokes about it and its ridiculousness. So I'm sure there's absolutely more to it, but it's quite a yeah. It's quite interesting to be from somewhere that's that has so much American influence, like I am. But you essentially kind of see a mirror of a mirror of a mirror, and you've never really been involved in the culture, on the ground. You haven't really talked to the people actually involved in this. So it is kind of, it's interesting to maybe discover that you've not been very informed about stuff.
I mean, Americans, find that out about, I mean, practically everywhere else in the world, I think, like on a daily basis, right? Like there's so, you go to Europe and you realize, oh shit, like I don't know anything. I don't know anything about my own country, right? Like, let alone other places.
Yeah, I think having the internet at your fingertips kind of gives you the illusion of knowing stuff, but when it comes down to it, it's quite an illusion.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I have that experience all the time. Just, like I think I have an opinion on something. I'm really confident about it, and then I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I
Yeah.
couldn't, I couldn't even explain my position.
Yeah, I think it's it's sobering to kind of get to grips with that. I think it makes you a better thinker to be confronted with your own inconsistencies, and also the fact that some people really know what they're talking about, and you might not. I don't know.
I mean, that's a huge thing with the internet, right? Like, there's such a difference between like tweeting about something or writing an essay about something where it's like completely like, uninteractive. And then when you have to, string a sentence together verbally, it's a totally different experience. You don't have time to think about it. You don't have time to like backspace or anything. You're off. If you're speaking, you're probably in a conversation, and it's such a different experience than just like tweeting it out or writing it down.
Yeah, there's extra layers to it, and yeah, like you said, you can't really refine it while you're saying it. And I know I sometimes sound a bit weird because most of my English is from reading rather than from speaking, so I have these weird formulations. But it's just like it has to come out. That's the only way I could do it. Apropos essays, I know you've written on sex work in the past, and we've talked about this before, and I've written on sex work as well. And you're not like a 100% sex positive feminist, which is already like an indictable offense. I think you're on the wrong track, on the wrong side of history there. But why is sex work like such a contentious issue at the moment? I mean, it's everywhere. AOC says it's work. Everything's pulling into the direction that this has to be, the new big thing, normalized, because women are at home and they're jobless, and you got to make a buck. So this is what we have now. Why it does feel a bit to me like it's being pushed quite aggressively, but maybe that's just my feeling. Yeah, why is this happening?
I think we're probably, on the same page about this one. You know, if you're a society that's, siloed into buyers and, sellers, people who are selling their bodies, and then people who are consuming bodies, you need to be pro sex work. With, if with increasingly less connection, that's the only, what else are you going to do with sex, right? Like, there's no serendipitous meeting. um, if it's hard to get traditional work, like, if you're in a gig economy, sex work of course makes sense. I also think it's like trendy for reasons that like people can't fully wrap their mind around. I think like these things just like pop up because they're edgy. I was listening to a podcast the other day where it was something like sex workers rights advocate or something, and she like couldn't quite explain, why she wanted to use like the word sex work over, or sex worker over prostitute, or like why it, why she was for decriminalization over legalization. And of course, there's plenty of people who could speak on these topics super, in a super educated way. But I think it's telling that someone who's enough of an activist to be invited on a major podcast, like, can't, like, doesn't quite know what she's working for or why.
Yeah.
So I do think it's like somewhat faddish in that way, but I don't know what like the deeper reasons are myself, other than these things do trend. But also, like, if you are a society of consumers, this is the most essential thing to consume.
Yeah, exactly. And this whole concept that, every aspect of your life has to be a gig. Yeah, you have to monetize, you can't just be, having sex like like a pauper with someone for no money while you
Yeah.
can make him bank. Like this is.
Well, people like aren't having sex because they want to have sex anyway, right? Like, it's a proxy for, connecting or making a friend in some cases, or validation. Like, when I talk about, sex with my friends, it's like never ever mentioned in this lens of like of love, or like even like I'm very attracted to this person. It's like a way of expressing that attraction. And it's like not surprising at all that like people say like, well, I may as well charge for it, because you're already so emotionally disconnected from it. Like, it really isn't different than like, any other, like, why would, if you're helping someone put up shelves over and over again, why wouldn't you eventually just like, jump on TaskRabbit and start charging for it? Because
Yeah,
it's just the trays that people aren't doing it because they want to.
yeah, that's a really good point, and I could kind of see it as well in my friend group. Like the conversation moved from being like awkward teenagers not knowing about love, or maybe it's just being a teenager, but it really morphed into like fucking, like, oh, I fucked this guy and things like that, and I'm like, oh my god, like, well, how did this happen? It's almost overnight, because it did kind of become a bit more of a, I don't know, of a sport at one point. I'm not sure exactly when it forked, but yeah, it was quite interesting, and it was kind of imperceptibly so. You could blame Sex in the City, but I think a lot of these things are kind of epiphenomena. They just happen in parallel to things that are already happening in society, and yeah, it's quite a, yeah, it's quite a good point. It's kind of scary as well.
Well, it's like you can understand the sort of like, you know if you're in an environment where men aren't respecting you, and you're trying to use sex as a way to engineer a relationship, and you're very desperate, you can understand sort of like ironically trying to like, build like a body count, or even like using the language of body count, because you already feel disenfranchised. What I think is weird is like then moving that into this, like, embracing it and using it as, a form of empowerment, instead of saying like, all right, how did we get here at all? Like, I find that often when women have like slept with like 70 people or some like crazy number like that, it's like they want to be in relationships. They're just being rejected so much that you have to like, with like this ironic detachment, be like, yeah, like I'm not getting my hopes up or anything. So it's weird that people aren't like trying to somehow combat that. It's more like leaning into something that I think is very painful for a lot of people too.
Yeah, I think you see this kind of in a lot of kind of modern cultural products aimed at 30 something women. We keep seeing this, the wine aunt meme, and the women who get drunk by noon, but there's this like silent rage and fear and disappointment at existence itself that just kind of beams from these postcards and whatever little cultural artifact you look at. And like the Chelsea Handler style culture, like there's these women have been used in a way with their own consent. And I think that's the hard thing. That's what they need to retcon, and why they need to kind of justify their lifestyle, because it is kind of an ultimate expression of freedom. It's like no one's really putting a gun to your head, but this was the only option that you had, because this was the kind of the emergent culture that you lived in. This was what
Well,
was on
the other
hand.
thing is like, you know does the wine aunt ultimately wants to be married and have children. The I feel like they're sort of a mirror to incels in a way, because I don't think at least not until Tinder, not until like recently, right? Like the women who like these are women who are being rejected by men. They like would the wine aunt still be single if she wasn't discarded after she, blew her date, right? Like, and that's part of it. And I think like maybe these women are like sluts, I don't think that's a great word to use, but because like they're trying to use sex to trap people and it's not working, and for some reason they never stopped because maybe the expectation has always been sex. I
Yeah.
think there's like a concurrent phenomenon where now women are rejecting men and they're turning themselves into the why not, but like the original, like like when I lived in New York, which I think is like the sort of exemplary, the example of like the wine on environment, right? I, you know, I wasn't rejecting men, right? Like men were rejecting me. And finally, like when I met someone nice who I was in love with, I got married, and I got married because I was in love, but I also got married because it's like I don't want to be I'm exiting the market today. Like I am not going to, like I remember like thinking I was 23 and I was thinking like I am I am not going to be like in my 30s and still like one night stand after one night stand after one night stand. I am living in the suburbs. I'm turning my back on this. This is humiliating.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I completely hear you. I mean, it's a lot of so much of this stuff is just just emergent from so many factors, and I feel like a lot of incel culture and also a lot of wine out culture is kind of programmed to be pointing fingers. Men are pigs, but also women are sluts. This it's kind of like this whole idea that if I have a daughter, I'm not going to let her do X and I'm going to steer her life into this direction. And my daughter's not going to be a slut. Your daughter's going to be whatever the culture around her is going to tell her to be. And this was the culture of the big city in the last, 20, 30 years. And it's not just necessarily the culture, it's also the conditions. There's technological conditions like the apps, there's economic conditions, there's, the fact that, a lot of women either wanted or needed to go, earn money. There's all sorts of things flowing into this pot and, pointing fingers at each other and saying, yeah, man, if women just got their shit together, we would be living in utopia. And I think, that's kind of where the buck stops with me with incel culture. Because I am pretty, I understand them and I think, there's just something to it, but it's you have no solutions, guys. These things are upstream like maybe a century ago.
yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Um, there's like I also feel like people don't recognize there's like multiple things going on too. Like incels are correct on a lot of stuff. It's almost like there's like three different parallel realities. They're all happening at the same time. Everyone's right. Um, but when you view it as one monolith, it doesn't, things don't track anymore. Like the older millennials who are still single aren't aren't the Zoomers who are on OnlyFans and who are single for that reason. Like they're different. There's different timelines and different demographics who are affected by problems that look very similar.
Yeah.
They'll lead us to the same place, which is no one has a family and everyone dies alone. But like, there's different things brought us to that point.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like I see a lot of people kind of on Twitter, especially kind of in these like traditional Catholic circles, NRX, things like that. People who are like, yeah, I'm just going to marry a woman who's 20 years old and she's just going to be like super pure and I'm going to go to the Tradwife farm and pick out my personal ingenue and I'm going to take her home to my mom and explain the world to her. That woman does not exist, at least in the Western Hemisphere. I don't really see her popping up. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like, there's a lot of illusions that people feed off of in these, very traditional corners of the internet.
Yeah, totally. I mean, all the older millennial guys who are like making fun of older millennial girls, it's like, or women rather, like, why didn't you marry her, 15 years ago if you're so passionate about this, right? Like, what do you think led these women down this path? If there are no you're right. There are no pure 20-year-olds. There's no pure 18-year-olds. There's no pure 14-year-olds at this point. Like it's corruption all the way down.
Yeah. And I feel like this is another instance of you kind of have to go through this cultural moment to get to the other side. Like the idea that, we're just going to stop history and we're going to just, build a tradwife farm and just like keep them in the bunker until they're 18 years old and good and ready to get married is just not realistic. So you kind of have to have a competing value system that's really interesting and enticing for good reasons, that can compete with whatever Moloch is offering this month, and just kind of showing people that, okay, this is where this path leads and it might be enticing to you, whatever, but this is also, if you want stability, a family, build something kind of maybe bigger than yourself, then this might be cool as well. But I think the hard part about this is that consumer society does tend to have people try to satisfy kind of their proximate interests. They're things that are expedient. You make money today on OnlyFans because this is the shortest way to make money, and then you don't really end up investing in things that might pan out in the longer term. And I feel like a lot of that wisdom's a bit lost. I don't know. That's kind of my fear.
Well, I do think that there's one possibility I see, and I have a lot of younger female friends, so I kind of see this maybe happening. I don't know if it'll scale, but like looking at people who are like maybe my age and a little bit older who don't have families, who don't have partners, and I mean it's sad and it's like almost uncomfortable for me to say, but like the younger generation looking at us and saying like, well, I don't want to be like that. That scares the shit out of me. I don't want to be Kristen Wiig having my first child at 47 years. Like that's
Yeah, I think NASA scientists were involved in that one.
oh, God, it's like I feel bad for her. But a lot of people are in that boat, and I think like you might that might scare people straight. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of, besides incentives. Just like looking at folks saying like this is like lonely and it sucks, and also I think there needs to be a better way. Like we've sort of opened up Pandora's box. Like male validation feels really good, and women become addicted to it. And it sounds kind of sexist to say that, but it's like, if you don't have a community, you're not getting, you're not getting any positive reinforcement anywhere else, and then you get it in the most powerful way possible through sex and through being told that you're beautiful, and being beautiful so valuable, and everyone's hot, and like now look at all this evidence that you're hot too. Like if we could somehow warn people that like that doesn't last forever, but also like you don't really need it in a surplus, like forcing people, I think like when women have like a lot of simps, like they don't realize like you might get like some money off of it or something, or people complimenting you, but like think about pursuing each of those people. Like do you really want that over what the alternative is? It's like less attention and one person, or cultivating other parts of your life. Like I think it's really hard it's like a sugar rush. Like you think about eating the slice of cake, but you don't think like what happens when I crash.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's really hard to communicate to people like it only feels good in this moment, and it's not going to feel good long term, and in fact you don't even really want it as bad as you think you do.
Yeah, I think your point about the alternatives is really good here, because it's like this is it's kind of like that experiments with rats that were given heroin and then they got a playpen and then they ignored the heroin because the playpen was so much fun. But we don't really have the playpen. We have less and less of a playpen in real life with real people, or things that are kind of naturally stimulating to people. And then you have all these this variety of candy bars that's been shoved down your gullet because this is the thing that you're supposed to be doing. I feel like the next step's probably something about rebuilding the playpen in some way, though it's comparatively hard to advertise a playpen, especially if it contains friction. If there's hard parts to the playpen that maybe the heroin doesn't have. The heroin's quite good. So yeah, it's I don't know, I feel like I think that's to me that's probably the more dystopian part of tech. It's kind of like that Louis C.K. skit, like, drugs are so good they're gonna kill you. And I feel like this these super stimuli that you have it baked into any tech product now, because they want to keep you on, are so good that they might not kill you, but they might just corrupt you in a way that you just kind of you won't feel for a while.
Yeah, I mean, but I think there's ways around it, right? Like, you and I were talking about this. Like, I'm on Twitter. Believe it, I tweet 200 times a day now, so it might be hard for people to believe at this point. But when I was, able to go into San Francisco and hang out with my friends, I would tweet like once a day, once every other day. Like, I didn't even check every day, because it was like going to a bar with my friends, or like watching a movie with my boyfriend, or like any just walking around, right, was so much better. That like, even though I get like the dopamine from like notifications and attention or whatever, it's just like, you forget. Our attention spans are short, our memories are short. Like, there there's I think that there's nothing else for people to turn to. Like, there's nothing stronger than the validation of strangers when you have no friends, or like when you have no community. Like, it's the same reason why not everyone becomes like addicted to cocaine, right? Like, coke's like great and fun, and like it probably makes parties a lot more exciting, but you're aware of its existence. A lot of people know what it feels like, but they're not seeking it out, because like the alternative is strong enough, and you know what it is. What the alternative lifestyle is. I think like a lot of people just don't know. Like, they don't have access to it at all, especially now, right? Like, if these lockdowns keep going on, like, how would you ever distract yourself from it? Like, how would you ever know that the sacrifice is worth it, because you don't ever get access to what you're sacrificing for?
Exactly. And I think, this new generation of kids who are essentially kind of lockdown kids, like they haven't really seen much of the world. And then now they've been in lockdown for a year or something like that. Their families probably don't have like some form of, big moral structure to convey to them either. They're, kind of floating around on the apps, and then they will not have any comparison. Like, I've grown up, almost pre-internet. Like, I had an email account at 13, but like I had those sweet few years before that where there was just nothing like it. And then I kind of have a comparison, and even so, I'm completely corrupted by these apps. But I can't even imagine what it's like to just wake up in the matrix and never have known that there is something else.
Yeah, well, you made an interesting point, sort of passing there, about parents not providing strong moral structures either. In America, at least, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but like, people don't like their families very much, and like they don't have relationships with their parents. So again, like, it sounds alarmist or extreme, like saying it out loud or even tweeting it, but like, in a lot of ways, these are replacements for your family too, more than just your friends. So like, even if you do know what it's like pre-internet, or the world away from the internet, it's really filling a need that like has never been filled before, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think this is super interesting, and I think there's kind of like two sides to it. I do think there's something about Boomer parents and even Gen X parents that is kind of like a special thing, in the sense that, in a way, they they're very much the devouring mother, and less the the kind of the strict rule abiding patriarch. And people, like, children do need that type of structure, and they don't really get it now with kind of the dominant strains in culture. And it feels like that people are missing that, and in a way, Boomer parents and we weren't very good parents. And on the other hand, there's also therapy culture, which kind of pathologizes almost every interaction with people and kind of marks it as trauma. And though trauma is something that really affects people and it really can mess up your life, classifying too many things as trauma, and just like seeing any interaction with your parents as traumatic if they didn't want to buy you something or whatever, is also a bit, I don't know, it's a bit exaggerated.
Yeah, that's actually, I have my own problems with therapy culture. Especially sort of like having to speak with sort of like the therapy rubric language, and like super rationally and in a detached way, like person to person. But and pathologizing your own behaviors, but marking everything your parents have done as trauma is a really good point. So it's like you already are separated from your parents, you probably don't have a relationship to them, and now a step further they're vilified. um, and it's like you have to, it's first of all, it's like not fair to people who've experienced real abuse, but also it's like you're inventing memories for people. You're like retroactively altering people's memories, so it's even worse than it already was.
Exactly. There's an entire kind of cottage industry of therapy. It's not like inducing trauma, but really, really going deep, like really navel gazing to an apocalyptic level about, how, like, I remember someone told me that, he could trace back all of his life's problems to the fact that he was neglected one day when he was 2 weeks old and his mother forgot about him and he was screaming, screaming, and then he relived this trauma in therapy. And I'm like thinking, man, this is a grift. Like these people are just milking you for money. Like all these, I don't know. It's almost I don't know. It's very new agey as well. Like it's just a lot of new age stuff going into it. Like this, I understand that you probably have some memories from 2 weeks old, but this is pretty detailed. I don't know if
Yeah.
you can recall that to that level. And yeah, there's so many. There's retreats. There's all sorts of stuff going into this. A lot of money exchanging
Well,
hands.
what's interesting is like it's because it's the confluence of like new age culture, corporate culture, therapy culture, three things that probably should have never met. This sort of like, you know, like what is it called? It was like reaching your full potential. It's some like new age movement was co-opted by corporate culture. This is as early as like the late 70s. And then it borrowed language from therapy, and then there was like therapies created off the back of it. And then it's, that's totally divorced from like, real therapy, or like therapy that has like a real utility. And now there's also like stuff in the middle where it's like stuff that does have utility, but it's like misapplied, or like people, too many people are in therapy if you're in a certain, socioeconomic class. So it really like, muddies the water.
Yeah, exactly. I kept seeing this more and more, just kind of living in London, living these kind of like even tech adjacent culture. Like so many people are like shamans, and they kind of bring in like all sorts of kind of, especially South American culture. They're kind of just appropriating all sorts of stuff from all sorts of these faith traditions, and it's also very new agey. Yoga was the big thing. All sorts of yoga, hot yoga, cold yoga, cryo yoga, whatever you wanted was the thing. It's definitely like a new space in neoliberalism. This whole shamanic neoliberalism. I don't know. It's quite interesting because I mean, my first instinct, as an old school new atheist at heart, I'm like, this is all bullshit. Like, guys, what's going on here? Because these are
Well, it's
apparently.
like it's enchantment as a commodity, right? Like you can't sell, we don't have enchanted existence. We're trying to buy it from some place. And I used to be like waist deep in the new age stuff. I was like a priestess. I mean, like I've done all the, like drug fueled shamanic journeys and stuff. But a lot of it is people like looking for this like mystical element, and then it gets really weird when like your startup starts bringing that into like, how could we engineer community? We're asking you to work these 60-hour weeks. It's like it's really strange, and like it's been baked into the history like for I think longer than it's been this visible. It's really strange. You know, people wanting religion, and there's all sorts of strange aspects to it. The overlap it has with like QAnon types. I mean, it goes real deep.
Really, I didn't know Q was like a part of this. I thought it's just like old boomers on Facebook.
Um, so the New Agers are like, people think people who are like real and like their whole life is New Age stuff. I think it's easy to assume they're like kind of left leaning, or like if not, actually on the left, like some sort of weird like Biden version of that, right? But they're mostly like libertarians, because it's all about like unverified personal gnosis. It's like they don't trust authority. It's very anti-authoritarian. So it's like Infowars, QAnon, all these people are like new age whack jobs. Like the funny thing about Alex Jones is if you were watching him when he was on Austin Public Access, this dude is like real, like he's doing like candle magic. He was dating a witch at some point. I mean, like he's into crystals. Yeah, the people sort of in his orbit in Austin. I mean, this is old information, right? It's probably changed since Trump, but like those people were like selling kratom and like taking essential oils instead of medicine. Like there's like a really, really big overlap there. Even the guy who broke into the Capitol, the Q shaman guy, he's
Hmm.
like super into, you know, interdimensional travel and stuff and astral projecting and all that crap. It's a really weird merging of subcultures.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, just to see it, like you said, as becoming commoditized, because it wasn't this kind of like, in a way, it was like at the seed of Silicon Valley and tech in general. Like Steve Jobs was famously loved acid, and a lot of these guys were kind of hippies in a way, or at least hippie adjacent. But just kind
Because
of
it's optimizing enlightenment, right? Like you're short. It's a shortcut. If you take, you know, you could go through all the rituals and like gateways of like learning these things as a shaman, or you could take acid. And I mean, not all tech people think this way, right? But I think there's definitely a contingent of tech people who are like, sure, but like this, I could do it like way quicker and way better if I do it this way. Whereas in these like religious communities or like these spiritual communities, you get like warned about these people who are trying to like skip levels, and skip
Mhm.
ahead to enlightenment.
Yeah, exactly. There's actually there's a name for it. I don't know, spiritual bypass or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, spiritual bypassing.
Yeah.
I like forgot all the terms as it was coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, yeah. I was in kind of like a more of a, I don't know, new agey vibe like a few years ago, and I kind of got in these communities, and I think there's just a lot to it as well. I mean, I've definitely learned from it, and I've changed, and I'm not my old new atheist self. But yeah, there's also my bullshit detector was going off the charts almost every time. But there's a lot to it. There's it's not all bullshit. That's what I'm gonna say. Um, and I think the kind of the last question I have, and this is something I tried to ask people on the show. I want to make this the question of the show: is do you have someone that you think is like a worthwhile thinker or writer, or someone that you know about that you think more people should know about, like someone subversive, obviously, and it's the spirit of the show, someone who's red pilled you on something.
Um, that's a good question, and I'm surprised that I like don't have an answer like off the top of my head. There's definitely like people in tech, um, and I like their thinking. So I guess I'll go with Balaji. He's doing this whole like networked state thing. I think he says like a lot of interesting, optimistic things about the future. Um, and this is a little bit embarrassed to say this because I hope it doesn't come off as like a plug for my own stuff. But I also really like the way Justin Murphy thinks. He because I feel like he's not afraid to be wrong, and he is really really like independent in his thinking. He listens to people, but he's really just going to do his own thing. And I think even if you don't agree with like what he says specifically, just his style of using the internet is is great because he's doing it honestly, he's doing it sincerely, and he's doing it totally unabashedly. So I mean, anyone with that attitude. Paul Scalise is another one who's just like totally like if we could all use the internet like Paul Scalise does, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm a total Justin Murphy stan as well. Like he is definitely part of the reason that I got on Twitter as well. And yeah, he doesn't care, and I think that's amazing. And obviously he's a polarizing figure because of that, because people, they don't like it when you don't care. But it's quite endearing, and he's doing so many cool projects. Like I mean, is your arranged marriage service still going on?
Yeah, that's still happening. It's a big project though, so it's not
Yes.
gonna be be quick by any means. But Yeah, he doesn't care, but he listens to people, which I think is like the other piece of it. Um, he hears people out, and I think like it's the perfect marriage of like knowing when to step down and knowing when to stand your ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's the kind of person who's also really good with community. I mean, he has community with indie thinkers, but he's the kind of person who will, put people in contact, who will, yeah, introduce new people to his network and things like that. And I think that's invaluable because he's such a good node. Like, people know about him, and it's quite. I mean, this is how I met you, actually.
Yeah, he's a super connector.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and also I have to say, yeah, Balaji is great as well. Yeah, I'll second that. Yeah, he's one of the techno optimist voices that makes me a little bit more of a techno optimist as well. Like, yeah, he knows what's up. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this, still kind of bare bones podcast with terrible audio. But I hope this was as fun for you as it was for me, and it was real fun for me. Um, and I hope to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.